Run your hand down your arm right now. Feel that? Almost nothing. No fur, no pelt, just a few million useless little hairs standing between you and every cold night for the last 2 million years. Every other mammal your size kept theirs. Wolves kept theirs. Bears kept theirs. Even your closest living relative, the chimpanzee, is covered head to toe in dense hair. You are the exception. A large, warm-blooded, land-dwelling mammal walking around essentially naked. And here's the strange part. Losing that fur should have been a death sentence. Cold nights, brutal sun, biting insects, nothing standing between your skin and the world. And yet somewhere in that nakedness was an advantage so powerful it rewired the entire trajectory of the human species. If even one of your ancestors had overheated on a hunt, just once, collapsed under the African sun before reaching the prey that fed the tribe, you would not be here to read this sentence. The real answer is stranger than we just didn't need it anymore. And there's one detail about how this happened, involving your sweat glands, and a trade-off so extreme it nearly broke the system, that we are not going to explain yet. This isn't a cosmetic detail of human history. It's one of the load-bearing pillars of why you exist at all. The loss of body hair didn't just change how humans looked. Researchers believe it changed how humans hunted, how far they could travel, how long they could stay active in the heat of the day, and ultimately how their brains grew large enough to become human in the first place. Every one of your ancestors, going back millions of years, had to survive that transition. Not adapt to it gradually and comfortably, survive it, exposed, in one of the harshest thermal environments on Earth. This is the story of your skin. And your skin has a longer memory than you think. Let's start with the myth we need to demolish first. Most people assume early humans lost their fur the way you might lose a habit, slowly, passively, because it stopped being useful once we started wearing clothes or building fires. That's backwards. The fossil and genetic evidence suggests hairlessness came first, long before clothing, long before controlled fire. Humans were naked apes wandering the savannah with nothing but bare skin for possibly over 1 million years before anyone stitched together the first animal hide. The idea that we shed fur out of comfort or convenience doesn't survive contact with the timeline. This wasn't a lifestyle choice. It was a physiological emergency response to a problem that was actively killing your ancestors. That problem was heat. Specifically, the heat generated by a body that had just started doing something almost no other primate does. Running long distances in the middle of the day, on 2 legs, under direct sun. This is where the technical term comes in, thermoregulation, which just means the body's system for keeping its internal temperature stable. For a furred mammal sprinting after prey, thermoregulation works through panting, the way a dog cools itself. But panting only works efficiently at a trot, not a sustained run. Somewhere around 2 million years ago, the ancestors of modern humans began relying on a hunting strategy called persistence hunting, chasing an animal not with speed, but with relentless endurance, for hours, until the animal literally overheated and collapsed. But every one of these long, hot chases carried one fatal weakness. We'll get to it. It's the most chilling detail in this entire story. The evidence for this shift is written directly into your body. Modern humans have between 2 and 4 million sweat glands, specifically eccrine glands, spread almost uniformly across bare skin. Chimpanzees, by comparison, have a fraction of that number, concentrated mostly in specific areas, and their fur actually traps heat close to the body during exertion. Researchers studying comparative primate skin have found that human sweat output under extreme heat and exertion can exceed 2 to 3 liters per hour. 2 to 3 liters. Read that number again. That's an extraordinary evaporative cooling capacity, and evaporative cooling only works efficiently on exposed skin. Fur blocks airflow and traps moisture against the body instead of letting it evaporate. Losing the fur wasn't incidental to this system. It was the system. Here's the twist, though. What looks like a primitive downgrade, a mammal stripped of its natural insulation, exposed and vulnerable, was actually a precision upgrade. A furred mammal chasing prey through midday heat will overheat and have to stop. A newly hairless, heavily sweating human ancestor would not. This meant early humans could hunt during the hottest part of the day, when most predators and competitors were resting in the shade. That single advantage, owning the heat of noon, may have opened up an entirely new ecological niche, not decorated with a cooling system, built around one, structurally. Now, back to that fatal weakness. A body covered in dense sweat glands and bare skin creates an enormous new problem. Sunburn, and worse, dangerous UV damage to skin that no longer has fur to filter it. This is almost certainly why researchers believe the loss of body hair and the evolution of dark melanin-rich skin happened together, not separately. Genetic studies, including research into the MC1R gene, suggest that dark skin pigmentation evolved specifically to protect newly bare skin from UV radiation while still allowing the sweat cooling system to function. Sit with the scale of that. Your ancestors traded a fur coat for a built-in cooling system, and then had to evolve an entirely separate defense just to survive the side effect of that trade. This wasn't one adaptation, it was a cascade, each fix creating a new problem that needed its own fix. There's a second layer to this story that rarely makes it into the popular version. Body hair doesn't just insulate. In most mammals, it also hosts an enormous population of external parasites: ticks, lice, mites. Some researchers argue that the loss of dense fur may have also functioned as a defense against parasite load, particularly as early humans became more social, living and sleeping in closer groups. Fewer places for parasites to hide meant lower disease transmission within a group. Now actually think about what that required. An entire skin ecosystem, rewritten, partly in response to cooling, partly in response to invisible microscopic threats your ancestors couldn't see and couldn't have understood, but whose pressure shaped them anyway. Cross-cultural and comparative studies add another layer of evidence. Anthropologists have long noted that virtually every documented human population, regardless of climate, retains the same basic pattern: dense hair only on the scalp, sparse fine hair elsewhere. Even populations living in extremely cold regions for thousands of years did not re-evolve dense body fur, because clothing and fire, invented later, solved the cold problem more flexibly than fur ever could. This is still debated, but it points to something important. Hairlessness became so fundamental to the human survival strategy that culture, not biology, ended up compensating for climate instead. Which brings us to the modern mirror, and the uncomfortable part. Humans today live in climate-controlled homes, drive in air-conditioned cars, and rarely run for hours in open heat. In some sense, we've built an entire civilization specifically to avoid using the extraordinary cooling system our ancestors nearly died perfecting. None of this is a moral failure. Nobody sensible is arguing you should go run a marathon at noon in the Rift Valley to honor your ancestors. But it's worth sitting with the fact that the system built into your skin right now, the one you barely think about, was purchased at a cost. Overheating deaths, sunburned, exposed skin. Generations of trial and error written not in books but in DNA. You didn't choose to be hairless. You inherited it, the way you inherited language, and posture, and the shape of your own hands. Your ancestors traded fur for endurance. Endurance for food, food for survival, and survival eventually for you. Every sweat gland on your skin right now is a small monument to a problem your ancestors solved before they had words for heat, or biology, or evolution. They didn't have air conditioning. What they had was sweat, bare skin, and the willingness to keep moving when everything else gave up in the shade.